Welcome to the Nation of History channel. Be sure to subscribe and like so you don't miss out on more videos like this one. On December 20th, 1973, an attack in Madrid hurled the vehicle of a Spanish government official to great heights, rising above the top of a nearby building. The event affected the local political succession and created satirical terms in popular culture about the car's trajectory. Irma Gries and Joseph Kramer appear in custody before facing trial for crimes committed during World War II. She served as a guard in concentration camps, while he held the role of commander. Both were convicted and put to death between 1945 and 1946. The end of World War II revealed abandoned strategic facilities in Berlin. On the floor of a flooded underground shelter, a military cap appears covered in mold in 1945. The record symbolizes the regime's total collapse after defeat, showing the physical decay of its last strongholds. Facing intense cold and an empty horizon, German soldiers move forward with their arms raised toward Soviet positions. The scene records the end of resistance, shaped by human and material exhaustion on the Eastern Front. The silent gesture symbolizes a decisive turning point and an unavoidable surrender. Parisian women attack a model and tear her Christian Dior dress on a Paris street in 1947. The outburst happened shortly after the war, when the new look's heavy luxury was seen as an insult to scarcity and hardship among the French public. During the 1971 conflict, the Pakistani army adopted identification methods tied to cultural and religious practices to distinguish people in Bangladesh. The record shows how physical criteria were used to map local demographics during the Civil War. During the invasion of the Soviet Union in July 1941, the advance of German forces led to the capture of thousands of fighters in the Nevel region. Among those held, Soviet women involved in the war effort faced the uncertainty of imprisonment, showing the total scale of the conflict on the Eastern Front. During the Nigeria conflict in 1968, a civilian carries ammunition on his head amid tensions in the Biafra region. The record captures improvised logistics and the severe impact of civil war on local people, showing the struggle to survive in a besieged area. During funeral ceremonies held in Washington on November 25, 1963, young John F. Kennedy Jr. paid a final tribute to his late father. The gesture took place in front of St. Matthew's Cathedral, leaving a deep mark on the United States' collective memory and symbolizing a nation in mourning. A mother holds her baby at the edge of the section reserved for black people on a bus in the United States during the 1950s. The segregation sign visible on the seat back documents discriminatory laws in force that restricted civil freedom in public spaces. During World War II, Germany developed the Krummlauf, a curved barrel attachment designed for assault rifles. This technical innovation allowed soldiers to fire around corners or over obstacles without exposing their bodies to enemy fire, aiming to increase safety in urban combat. A heavy artillery piece lights up the French darkness during a night firing in 1918. The record captures the destructive power of the technological weapons that defined the end of the Great War, showing the devastation and industrial scale of fighting on European ground. Soviet soldiers pose on the steps of the Reichstag in Berlin at the end of World War II in 1945. Among the veteran fighters, the presence of the youngest Red Army soldier stands out, symbolizing the sacrifice of generations in the final Soviet victory. In the 1940s, the occupation in France created complex relationships of power and resistance. This record, taken with a prisoner of war, shows a woman wearing a foreign military uniform, pointing to collaboration accusations that marked the period after liberation. French women accused of intimate collaboration faced harsh public punishments shortly after liberation in 1944. Shaving heads served as a mark of social humiliation imposed by civilians, reflecting tensions and a desire for national cleansing after years of occupation. A satirical Western press cartoon published in 1939 mocks the unlikely union between Joseph Stalin and the German leader. The illustration portrays the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact as a political marriage, symbolizing the non-aggression agreement that secretly planned the division of Europe. A covert photograph reveals the United States Supreme Court justices in 1932 during a formal session. The record was made by Eric Salomon, who hid a camera in a fake cast, defying the official ban on taking images inside the courtroom in the Capitol. A massive crowd gathered in Boston in 1908 to witness one of magician Harry Houdini's most daring feats. He prepared to jump from a bridge while fully chained, pushing physical limits and logic in a breathtaking public spectacle. In June 1934, a nanny carefully watched a child placed in a wire cage hanging outside an apartment. The device was used to help babies living in tall buildings get fresh air and direct sunlight. The steamship Princess May was involved in an unusual incident on August 5, 1910, when it ran aground on a reef at Sentinel Island in Alaska. Low tide left the ship dramatically perched on the rocks, creating one of the most iconic maritime photographs of the early 20th century. Women's industrial safety took a peculiar turn during World War II with the creation of a rigid plastic bra. The item was distributed to workers in war factories to help prevent serious accidents in production machines, protecting the body from impacts and debris. A 19th century diagonal suspension machine reveals the curious mechanical approaches of early physical therapy for body stretching. The hand-operated wooden device reflects the search for orthopedic solutions in Swedish medical institutes that influenced the design of modern exercise equipment. A supposed telepath tries to hypnotize a chimpanzee dressed in human clothing during an experiment in 1941. The bizarre scene reflects the era's interest in parapsychological phenomena and the use of animals in public demonstrations meant to test the limits of the mind. At Bowling Field in Washington in 1921, a curious two-horn acoustic locator was used for air defense. Before radar was invented, these giant devices were key for detecting the sound of distant aircraft, allowing the military to monitor the skies with precision. Bobby Gibb broke barriers by becoming the first woman to finish the Boston Marathon in 1966. Without an official bib number due to the era's gender restrictions, her unofficial participation became a landmark moment in the fight for women's equality in sports. Roger Mills and Berta Linson cut their wedding cake on August 2, 1970, celebrating the first interracial marriage in Mississippi. The event happened just 3 years after the Supreme Court struck down restrictive laws, challenging the last racial barriers enforced by the state in the 20th century. The meeting between Tame Ruz Vanacha and his son Ivan in 1980 symbolizes the region's complex military path in the 20th century. While the 112-year-old father wore medals from World War I and the Russian Civil War, the son displayed World War II decorations on his uniform. During the civil conflict that began on July 19, 1936, volunteers from many nations joined popular militias to defend specific political ideals. Using metal helmets adapted with hand-painted symbols was common among fighters seeking visual identification. Italian explorer Attilio Gatti poses beside two hired pygmy men and a captured gorilla in the Belgian Congo in 1930. The scene reflects the era's anthropological and hunting expeditions, shaped by a colonial mindset that exploited both wildlife and local African populations. Russian peasants cross a river in the Yenisei province in the early years of the 20th century, carrying a killed moose on an improvised raft. The scene shows the harsh reality of subsistence in Siberia, where hunting was essential for life in the vast isolated forests of Imperial Russia. A narrow alley in Glasgow shows the harsh conditions of Scottish tenements on August 18, 1868. Captured by Thomas Annan, the scene records the worn architecture of Old Vennel, where the long exposure creates ghost-like blurs of its residents. Graffiti-covered cars and the presence of the guardian angels defined the New York subway in the 1980s. The system was widely seen as the most dangerous in the world at the time, reflecting a public safety crisis and urban neglect across the American metropolis. During World War II, aircraft personalization became common among crews to boost morale. A Stuka bomber displays a smiling face painted on its front fuselage, turning technical design into a striking psychological statement in the skies over Europe. During World War II, the Barrage Balloon Training Center at Camp Tyson in Tennessee used unusual aerial technology for defense. A giant octopus-shaped balloon was used in military drills to test buoyancy and the strength of structures in the field. In 1871, urban infrastructure in many places still depended on manual services to maintain public hygiene. Workers carried heavy containers over long distances, keeping towns running in a time before sewer systems. The auto industry tried curious innovations in 1961 with the creation of tires made from translucent synthetic rubber. Lights installed inside the wheels let the vehicle glow in the dark, reflecting the era's futuristic style and technological promises. Los Angeles hosted a unique road structure in 1929, designed by Harry Rocks, that looked like a roller coaster. The winding route full of dips gave drivers a wild driving experience, challenging the era's conventional civil engineering standards. The massive Esso Hibernia oil tanker towers over the urban landscape of Wallsend in the United Kingdom during its construction in 1970. The ship's monumental scale contrasts with the small houses and streetcars, showing the power of British shipbuilding. The vessel represents the peak of engineering of that era. Construction of the Eiffel Tower in Paris advanced significantly in 1888, revealing complex iron structures that would change architecture worldwide. Gustave Eiffel's project for the World's Fair challenged the engineering of its time, rising over the French capital as a symbol of technical innovation. Georgian warriors from the Kevsur ethnic group demonstrate combat skills using traditional armor and swords in a fencing-style training session. The record captures the preservation of ancestral military tactics in the Caucasus Mountains in the early 1900s, blending cultural heritage and defense. President Emil Hácha leaves Berlin in March 1939 after being forced to give up Czechoslovakia's independence to the German regime. Visibly devastated inside his vehicle, he returns to Prague as his country faces the start of a brutal occupation. King Mahendra's coronation in Kathmandu marked the start of a decisive political era for Nepal in 1955. His rule, which lasted until 1972, consolidated the authoritarian panchayat system, restricting parties and centralizing monarchical power in the country. King Faisal of Saudi Arabia attends a diplomatic dinner at the Royal Palace in London in the late 1960s. Surrounded by figures from British high society, the monarch engages in a setting of political cooperation, symbolizing strategic ties between the two nations in the Middle East. A Soviet family watches television closely in 1991 during Mikhail Gorbachev's historic resignation address. Captured at home, the moment reflects the uncertainty felt by millions as the Soviet Union's collapse approached, marking the definitive end of a geopolitical era. Lieutenant Alex Vratsiu celebrates shooting down 6 Japanese aircraft on June 19, 1944. The feat happened during the Battle of the Philippine Sea, an episode known in military terms as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Smiling, the pilot holds up 6 fingers to mark his historic aerial victory. A girl holds colorful balloons during the May 4, 1968 parade in Lviv, then in Soviet Ukraine. The Labor Day celebration was a central event on the communist calendar, serving as a display of strength and worker unity across the Eastern Bloc. A mother and her daughter walk calmly through a New York park wearing afro hairstyles that symbolized racial pride and the era's political style. The 1970 record highlights urban fashion and the cultural movement of Black identity affirmation gaining strength in American cities. Pioneer Mary Kenneth Keller broke major barriers by becoming the first woman to earn a doctorate in computer science in the United States. Her work at the University of Wisconsin on June 7, 1965, helped develop the basic programming language and broaden technical access. The Colorado Springs Laboratory became the stage for Nikola Tesla's bold experiments. In December 1899, the inventor aimed to control massive electrical discharges using his magnifying transmitter. The iconic image uses double exposure to create the visual effect of lightning cutting through dense air. Frank Zappa and his band, the Mothers of Invention, posed beside Jimi Hendrix in 1967. The photo session was meant for the visual concept of the album We Are Only in It for the Money. The satirical set was built to parody the era's psychedelic look, bringing rock icons together in an irreverent composition. Beatlemania reaches extreme levels in Sydney in the 1960s when a desperate fan tries to get Paul McCartney's attention. The episode reflects the intense frenzy surrounding the British band, documenting its cultural and social impact around the world. Anita Ekberg poses for a photo shoot in 1950, solidifying her image as one of the decade's major symbols of international cinema. The Swedish actress, who would later gain global fame through European productions, shows the classic look that defined Hollywood's golden age glamour. Actress Rosalind Russell relaxes behind the scenes of the production Anjos Rebeldes in 1966. Dressed in the habit of her character, the Mother Superior, she rides a bicycle with her legs raised, showing the light mood on the set of this comedy classic that explored life at a Catholic boarding school. An improvised radio station was set up inside the Hotel St. Moritz to broadcast coverage of the Winter Games in Switzerland. Operators work surrounded by analog equipment and cables in an adapted room, showing the technical effort to bring sports news to a global audience in real time. Universal Orlando Resort celebrated its official opening in 1990 with a large gathering of employees and iconic characters. The record marks the start of operations for the entertainment complex in Florida, highlighting the classic entrance arch and the team that brought the ambitious tourism project to life. A long line of moviegoers waits eagerly on the sidewalk for the premiere of a film phenomenon that would change global pop culture. The poster announces showings beginning on June 24, 1977, confirming the immediate impact of the science fiction film made by George Lucas in the 1970s. The modest street stand opened in 1941 marks the humble start of the Carl's Jr. chain in California. With signs advertising hot dogs for 20 cents and hamburgers for 25 cents, the setup ran under a simple cover, showing the early rise of fast food culture that would transform the industry. At a simple counter, French customers try Coca-Cola for the first time, watching closely as the drink is poured. The scene captures curiosity and a bit of doubt toward a new taste, still far from becoming an everyday habit. In 1950, the soda was beginning its path into European culture. Everyday life in the New York subway in 1953 offered simple conveniences for rushed riders. A vending machine in the station allowed the purchase of different kinds of chocolate for just 1 cent, reflecting lower costs of living and the mechanization of city consumption. The towering Taj Mahal in Agra appears in one of the first color photographs ever published by National Geographic. Originally captured in 1914, the image shows the white marble monument framed by cypress trees and reflecting pools, preserving India's look through the early centuries' exploratory lens. Children play on an improvised swing tied to a streetlight pole in Manchester in 1943. The record captures a moment of resilience and everyday simplicity in England during World War II, surrounded by cobblestone streets and bare brick houses. New York City streets in the 1960s served as lively stages for cultural and social mixing. At the time, United States and Puerto Rican flags on customized bicycles signaled the growing influence of Caribbean immigration in everyday neighborhood life. Commercial aviation changed in a major way in 1930 with the introduction of the first flight attendants by Boeing Air Transport. Wearing standardized green uniforms with elegant capes, these women pioneered a profession meant to make travel feel more personal and more secure. A modest storefront in South Korea housed Samsung's early operations when it began as a small trading company focused on exporting local goods. Founded on March 1, 1938, the organization would expand decades later to become a global technology giant. The inside of the first Tiffany & Company store shows a refined selection of luxury goods, silverware, and decorative china that define New York's elite. Established on September 18, 1837, the brand began as an upscale stationery shop before becoming a worldwide icon of fine jewelry. The Pulsar, introduced in the market around mid-1975, represented a technological leap by combining wristwatch, calculator, and computer functions in a single accessory, Using a small stylus to press tiny buttons reflects the 1970s push for innovation in consumer electronics. Victorian-era ingenuity often looked for solutions for men's appearance, as shown by the mustache protector patented by Virgil A. Gates in 1876. The metal accessory attached to the ears kept hair from touching liquids and food, preserving the wax and the shape of the facial hair. In 1916, city travel was changing in curious ways with the appearance of the autoped, considered one of the first motorized scooters in history. The vehicle was used by many social groups, including women seeking independence while moving through big city streets. Home convenience looked for creative solutions in the 1940s with a monitoring viewer for washing your back. The metal device with angled mirrors let a person see hard-to-reach areas while bathing, making hygiene easier and allowing brushes to be used on blind spots with full independence. In the 1940s, soldiers on the front lines looked for brief moments of relief to endure the hardship of war, as shown by this record of a German soldier with his dog. The animal appears wearing a helmet and goggles, highlighting companionship and rare light moments in military life. Technology aimed at women's clothing appeared at the 20th International Exhibition of Inventions in Brussels. On March 13, 1971, a model tested a spiral electric bra, a piece that reflected the era's search for unusual electronics-based functions applied to fashion. At the height of World War II, the United States Coast Guard issued an official identification document for Herman. The cat worked as a rodent hunter at the Port of Baltimore, receiving the title of Experienced Mouser on January 12, 1943, to help protect naval supplies. Early 20th century furniture engineering looked for versatile solutions for everyday school life. In a 1913 photograph, a student rests on an innovative desk that turned into a hammock. This kind of invention shows technical creativity applied to comfort in education. A technological innovation marked 1938 when Station War in New York transmitted the world's first wireless newspaper. Children watched with curiosity as a continuous printout produced a children's page from a Missouri paper, hinting at the future of communications. The imposing National Museum in Prague dominates the skyline behind Wenceslas Square as yellow and red streetcars move through the Czech capital's center. In the height of the 20th century, the urban motion shows the shift from classical architecture to modern life under the influence of the socialist era. Soviet women pose proudly beside their first televisions in the mid-20th century Soviet Union. Owning a television was a symbol of status and technological progress in socialist homes, transforming domestic leisure and how information traveled. The notorious Al Capone appears in a rare family record in Florida with his wife May during Christmas 1946. Weakened by health complications he had neglected for decades, the former Chicago organized crime boss lived his final days in seclusion. Veterans of the Third French Siege of Tarragona in 1809 gather for a final photograph in 1869. The image preserves the last survivors of a brutal Napoleonic conflict, showing the long lives of these fighters decades after the battles in Spain. Engineers and photographers operate the world's largest camera, built in 1900 to capture a full image of a luxury train from the Chicago and Alton Railway. The colossal device required 15 men and used massive glass plates to ensure a sharp photograph. Early 20th century wedding portraits capture the formality and style customs of a transitional era. In the image, the couple poses in traditional clothing, with the bride's long veil and elaborate bouquet contrasting with the groom's strict attire, preserving the seriousness of marriage rites of the time. Theater Square in Moscow shows the grandeur of the Bolshoi Theater in the 1930s. The city scene buzzes with streetcars and pedestrians, highlighting architectural and social changes in the Soviet capital during a period of intense modernization and state control over culture. French knife sharpeners worked lying on wooden boards in the early 20th century to avoid chronic back problems and make better use of sharpening stones. The unusual technique let craftsmen keep precise edges while their dogs helped turn the grinding wheels. The Temple of the Sun in Palenque rises amid Mexico's dense vegetation, revealing the grandeur of classic Maya architecture. The ruins preserve elaborate roof combs and reliefs that tell the story of ancient rulers. The monumental structure shows the technical skill and social complexity of that civilization. Brussels' paved streets served as the setting for the daily work of milk sellers, who used draft dogs to haul goods. This common 19th century practice shows how animals were integrated into the local urban economy before motorized delivery. Traditional Dutch clothing in the early 20th century features extremely wide pants, known as klepbroek, popular among fishermen and rural workers in places like Volendam. The garments were designed to provide freedom of movement and practicality in damp coastal environments. Theodore Roosevelt was President of the United States in 1904, the year he strengthened his progressive foreign policy and the idea of the Square Deal. Known for energetic leadership, he was central to modernizing the United States Navy and advancing environmental conservation, influencing generations. The Mississippi River presented a rare scene in 1905 when it froze completely near St. Louis, Missouri. The thick ice allowed pedestrians to walk on the river's surface, with the imposing Eads Bridge in the background, an engineering landmark connecting the east and west banks. The portrait of Awe Ayu, also known as Pretty Flower, recorded in 1908 by photographer J.L. Blessing, captures the dignity of a Seneca woman. A member of the Iroquois Confederacy, her detailed clothing reflects the rich cultural heritage and resilience of indigenous peoples in North America. Located in Hamburg, Germany, this centuries-old residence represented early 16th century urban architecture. Built in 1504, the structure featured wooden details and housed local businesses, but it was demolished in 1910, marking the end of what had been the city's oldest home. Gheorghe Muchetani appears wearing traditional clothing and period weapons. He led the first Aromanian band within the internal Macedonian Revolutionary Organization. His activity took place between 1903 and 1907, making him a central figure in regional resistance movements in the Balkans. If you enjoyed this video and want to support the channel, please use the Super Thanks tool below. Your contribution helps us keep bringing you amazing historical content. Thank you so much for your support, and see you in the next video.